Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Opendata Implementation Strategies panel. For this discussion, I'd like to invite, of course, our colleagues, Ms. Sharon Dempsey from the UK Parliament and Mr. Daniel Schuman from Demand Progress, an organization which aims to protect the democratic character of the internet, which is a daunting task, if I may. Regarding open data, citizens have been claiming for transparency in the 21st century, and we could see that, for instance, during the uprisings from around 2010 to 2013. And with an increasing number of fake news, governments need to be transparent to fight it back. Transparency has become an important ally for legislative houses to improve democracy and show the people the difficulties of reaching consensus among different opinions. Open data has been considered an important way of providing transparency in a world of data availability and so many computational resources, which bring us to this panel. Ms. Sharon, although open data does not need to be expensive, the basic structure is required to consistently provide reliable data in a timely manner. Could you share the experience of the UK Parliament and help other legislative houses on how to prepare themselves for this challenge?
Yeah. Okay, so hello everybody. So as some of you are probably aware, the UK Parliament has now funded a project to refresh our open data platform. So I'm really very pleased woman. It's been hard to get the business case through, and I'll give you some tips on that as we go through the next few minutes. And we've started now a 2-year project, and we're in design stage for how we're going to implement the new data platform. As we all know, digital's driving change. It's driving the need of our citizens really to expect more of our data. They know the power of data, and that was very much part of our business case. But we also factored into the business case the fact that we've got a platform which was problematic. It's old technology, we couldn't upgrade it. And so we looked at the cost of running the existing platform and not being able to satisfy our users' needs. So the approach that we're taking at the moment is a number of stages. And I'd like to just briefly talk you through those because you might find it useful. So the first step is being absolutely clear on what data that you want to share. So what are the data sets that you want to share, and build a register and build up the information about those data sets. So we're looking at, you know, what the source systems are, what the database technology is, what the data models are, any data quality issues with that data. That's always a challenge with open data, and building data cleanse plans. But one of the key things you've got to do at this stage is really understand who owns that data and who is going to be your champion, if you like, and the person that you go to for decision making if you need to make any changes. The second bit is the complex architecture. You know, Rodolfo said it can be cheap, it can also be expensive. We're taking a more expensive option, I'm afraid. We see value in linking our data. So the architecture is not looking at single data sets. We've got records across each of the procedural systems that we're linking together. I'll give you an example. So activities that a member may participate in, we would link that back to their details in the data set that holds their data. So we're constantly building up linkage so that search is much easier. We also index and classify our data through complex process. So we put metadata on there that is based on our parliamentary ontologies. So that's an area of work around data architecture that we're going to review and refresh. Document the as-is processes. So the job of the data platform is not to fix the source systems and the procedural systems. There's other challenges on those. What the job of the data platform is to know when the data will be committed onto the source system so that it can integrate it across onto the data platform. So the variables around how you transfer that data from the source system to the data platform is something that you need to design. And the stage that we're in at the moment is designing the target architecture. So how are we going to host that data? What technologies are we going to use? how are we going to integrate it, and what services are we going to add into the integration layer? So we're looking at how do we validate the data before it gets onto the data platform, and we're looking at how we trap errors, because what we don't want to do on a data platform is give the user of that platform false information. We have to validate the data before it gets there. And very much our approach is we're not going to do many ways of doing that integration, even though we've got potentially at the moment 15 source systems. We're not going to have 15 different ways of integrating. We're going to have a kind of common set of services that sit in the integration layer. We're also looking at how we build the open data platform in with and alongside the rest of the data architecture in the UK Parliament. So it isn't just about procedural data. We know that we need to augment that at some point with external data or with corporate data. And so that's the kind of flexibility to scale and grow the open data platform is something that's very core to our architecture. And then the final step is the user experience. Yeah, so engaging with, we've already commissioned our customer experience group, and they're going out and they're surveying what kind of user interfaces do we need, what kind of search capability, what kind of features do we need on that platform. And we're also working with external agencies as well, academic agencies, and so getting their requirements so that we can really make it work for users. But overall, we have taken a perhaps not a cheap option because of the complexity of our data models. But the way that we justified that in our business case and is that the return on investment is very much, it's a tool that isn't just for citizens and public. It's a tool that will be used by researchers, parliamentarians and other people internally, and it's one that we can scale out. So hopefully that approach is of some use to and answers the question, Rodolfo.
Thank you, Sharon. I would like to hear comments on this issue as well.
So a lot of, for us, you know, as you mentioned, we're not inside the House or in the Senate, we're outside. But that allows us, at least in the US, to take a more holistic perspective to what's going on. Many of the players inside the House or the Senate or the support offices and agencies think about their silo. They think about the information that they own. And they think about how they can either make it available to how they can make it available to the stakeholders, to members of Congress, to staff, but they don't often have the opportunity to think, what happens if you can bring the data across the different silos? What do you do when you take information that's housed in the House and mix it with the Senate or with the executive branch? Thinking about different use cases. They also don't necessarily think of all the internal users. There are often different uses that are desired from people who are inside the Congress, but they can't get access to the information they need. We had a circumstance, for example, where folks in the leadership inside the House of Representatives were going to an outside data provider to get access to legislative information that was originally published internally, but not in formats that they need. So we view our role in many ways as an enzyme, as a catalyst, as we can demonstrate the connections that can be made, or we can see a little bit further down for what might be possible. And we try to bring together the different players inside to talk to each other and to do what they often can't do, which is to bring a little bit of pressure. We can make the positive business case for why something should happen, but politicians are more responsive to other arguments. So we also can provide validation for good practices and encouragement when it's time for practices to change. So in a healthy ecosystem, we do have our role. Our role probably shouldn't be as big as it is. But in the very decentralized model that is the United States Congress, we're kind of the irritant a little bit that helps encourage some of the growth that that may not happen at the same rate that it would were we not present. So I'm envious of, for example, what's been happening in the UK. I've been watching it for years. While there are players in our internal system who have that long perspective, it is not universally shared, and it's something that we're encouraging the adoption of.
Thank you very much. Very nice comments. And Daniel, I would like to stick with you for the next question, because publishing the data in open format is really a challenge, but not the only one. Many legislative houses are struggling to motivate citizens to make use of this data. If they are not successful at doing that, only big organizations are going to make use of it, which will lead it to be a less democratic asset. And that is exactly what demand progress aims to avoid. What are your thoughts on how a legislative house could foster the use of its open data by the citizens?
So I think that it's important to think about the different kinds of users. So for example, 20 years ago, when only a handful of people had access to higher quality information about the legislative process, those people were often the intermediaries. So they were journalists, for example. They were an entity called GovTrack, which is a legislative republishing service. And while wasn't this model that people often think of as, you go to, an individual citizen goes to the congressional website and gets their information, there are often many intermediaries in civil society, in the press, to a lesser extent academics, who would sort of play this intermediate role so that there would be a greater impact or greater sharing of this information. As the legislative information has become published in better formats, more consistently, with more useful information, what we're seeing are more innovators. We're seeing businesses, more businesses being able to step into the space to be able to develop specific tools to solve specific problems. We're seeing more of a feedback mechanism around people communicating back up to the legislative players around what they need. So it is a real problem in terms of making sure that people know what exists and how to use it. Maybe 9 years ago, the House of Representatives created a public-facing task force called the Bulk Data Task Force, originally with the role of figuring out whether it should publish bill status summary and text online as structured data, but it has continued as a working group to address a number of other publication questions. And one of its most notable features is that it invites the public in. Its proceedings are online. Before COVID, you could go there in person as well. They have a GitHub repository where you can ask for information. There is a public face, so that for people who really are interested in the details, they can engage with it either in real time or asynchronously. And there is also a set of collaborators, sort of the rings around the planet, those of us in civil society that can also help guide people outside to find this information. So building these partnerships, these collaborations, these different on-ramps has helped more people to be able to engage with the legislative information, because you're right, it can be difficult and expensive, it can be tricky. There are all sorts of things that you wouldn't necessarily know that takes years and years and years to become an expert in. And the more there are those, the concern that is often raised by members of Congress and their staff is, what if someone misunderstands something? There's this deathly fear that someone's going to read information and draw the wrong conclusion. Of course, when there's no information, people are going to draw all the wrong conclusions. Having better data means you get fewer mistakes and a better opportunity to correct it. But that said, as you foster these relationships, you can start asking, well, what happened in 2007? Why doesn't this data make sense? And you can get an answer, so you don't just sort of run off and be confused. You can actually tell a better story about what's happened. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer to a fairly straightforward question, but I hope that it was helpful.
No, not at all. That was a very good answer. Thank you very much, Daniel. And Sharon, being a provider of open data, what are your thoughts and how is the UK Parliament planning to stimulate the democratic use of open data?
Yeah. Well, we are working, as I say, with the customer experience team, and you know they're going out and doing some surveys. So we deliberately focusing on different kind of personas, if you like. So we've got news, we've got academia, we've got you know citizens, we've got schools, and the participation group and department that we have within Parliament, also archives as well. So we're deliberately targeting different groups and trying to get their customer experience and journey and get their requirements into it. So that is definitely part of the project. But going back to what Daniel said, one of the activities that we are partnering with Huddersfield University is that brokerage, right? They've been getting our data from a broker. Yeah, and we can't understand why, you know, it was supposed to be about data quality, and I'm not convinced it is about data quality. So we are analysing that rationale, you know, what is it? And we're working through the process. And our objective as part of this project is to stop that need. You know, we will give them what they need. We will be able, one measure of our success will be, we will be able to provide the data in a format that is usable for their needs. Yeah, because at least we understand what they need, and there'll be other users, you know, that we can't get close to. So that's definitely something that we are looking at. And I think the other bit that you said, that trust, that fear, you know, is data isn't just about the native data, it's about the stuff that goes around it. It's the definition, it's the glossary, it's the, you know, how we measure it. In Parliament, in UK Parliament, as part of our data strategy, and we've been building strong data capabilities. I'm really proud of the team. The way that we define our data, the way that we measure it, you know, and that we model it is something to be proud of. And those are the things that go alongside with the data. This is how you interpret it. And I think some of that really is the kind of thing that we want to do to get the data out there.
Thank you very much. Moving to a different subject, and I guess that this one is a tricky one. And,
yeah.
A way of improving democracy is by comparing one democratic country with another. And that's maybe a kind of trouble. But Sharon, how could legislative open data be organized among parliaments to stimulate the development of tools that could promote democracy in one country based on the knowledge and experiences of other countries?
Yeah, so it was tricky, Rodolfo. I thought that was a bit mean of you, really, to ask me this question. So I've come up with three different scenarios, which I hope answers it. So I started off with like statistical, so open data that's statistical, and that's easy to compare, isn't it? You know, like for like, except I'm sure it isn't. So all my answers here have got a big caveat on, which is this is a technical answer. I'm not saying that we should do the examples that I'm talking about. So if we took a simple example, right? So the UK Parliament, it passes acts of law. They relate to topics, for example. Some take a long time to get approval, some take shorter time. We could present on the open data platform simple data that was statistical, facts. So how many acts in this period? How long did they take? What type of topics were they discussing? For example, what linkages is there to research material? So we could do that. I don't know whether it's sensible or not. It doesn't matter. We could definitely do that, and it could be compared. How would we do it though? How would we do a comparison of how much activity, if you like, is going on from Parliament to Parliament? Well, I think it could work like this. And stage one would be, there'd be a working group which would define what it is that we want to compare, you know, so what is it that we'd want to compare? And that would create a standard. So what do we want to compare? How do we define it? What level of quality has each Parliament got to prepare it to? How frequently would we do it? So a standard, you know, we'd create an open standard. And then each Parliament would then implement that onto their systems. Okay, we can generate that data and we can put it on our data platforms. And then the next bit would be that that data would be consumed through an API onto a potential broker system. So it can be done, yeah, and you could compare 10 there, 50 there, you know, whether it's a sensible, you know, kind of example doesn't matter. You know, we could come up with sensible examples, but it could be done. And it could be beneficial, you know, so we could, you know, point not just to raw facts, but point to research and material as well related to topics, and those topics may be of global interest. So yes, we could do that. I think the second area I just wanted to talk about was, you know, when I came into Parliament 2 years ago, I was really surprised by how much bespoke software we had, you know, and you know, I come from a world of buy not build, you know, and everything is now being developed for Parliament. And I've been listening to some of the talks earlier, and they've got exactly the same problem that we have, which is there aren't enough developers. We've got a huge backlog. So we've gone through this digital chaos here, and we've created lots of bespoke bits of software to cope with the hybrid world. But where are all the developers? And we've got a 3, 4, 5, 6 year backlog. I think we've all probably got that kind of problem. So I think, again, common tooling is something that has got potential, in my opinion. Common tooling, you know, you do it in other organisations. And the question there would be, could suppliers, if we've got common enough problems, could suppliers create vanilla products that could be configured to suit our needs? So I think that's an area, Rodolfo, that definitely needs looking at. So common tooling. The third one, which is a problem that that we're all going to face, and it's something I've been looking at recently, and it's something that will end up with data that does go on our open data platform, and data that can be compared should we go down that route, is around the whole carbon neutral, carbon zero problem. Yeah, so this is like a global agenda. We've already got smart technology in Parliament that's monitoring carbon usage in parts of the estate. I'm looking at how we pull that data together so that we get a pan-Parliament view of consumption of energy. But over the next few years, it's going to get a tougher problem for us all. It isn't just about measuring current utilisation. It's how do we implement calculators that estimate how much the consumption the devices in the chambers are going to be using, or how much consumption of transport of a member to get into Parliament. So we're going to have scenarios, I think, that would be really useful for us to workshop together to say, what would the data model, if you like, look like for carbon, for all of the processes that go on in a Parliament, and what tools would we need? So for me, I think that's a kind of future thing that would be really beneficial, where we've got a common pattern that we could work on. So I think that the three options to summarise: one, yes, we can compare raw data if we came up with a working group and a set of common ambitions. Two, I think tooling. I think we should be looking, because we've all got the challenges of hybrid and the need to carry on with parliamentary processes in that mode. And three, I think we've got some common global agendas that could potentially drive the need for comparison of data.
Thank you very much. Daniel, what are your thoughts on the potential benefits of comparisons among democratic countries?
So I think that they can be very helpful. And I have to say, I associate myself with all the comments that were just made. I think that those three aspects are just phenomenal. So we had a real life example of sort of a worldwide democracy competition in the last 18 months, which was COVID. The ability for parliaments to be able to continue to function when members are not necessarily physically present or their staff are not physically present requires a significant amount of technology to be able to, can you track what's happening? Can you vote in real time? Can your votes be counted? Can you engage with your constituents and can they engage with you? When we watched what parliaments were able to effectively stand up technology to do this that had already built the underlying infrastructure and which ones did not, which ones were, so that is one sort of where everyone was looking around and trying to figure out, okay, well, New Zealand and Australia has this proxy voting system, and how does that work for them, and what's going on in Brazil, and oh, they're like, and just trying to figure sort of that out. So that's one sort of real world example. Another, and I think this goes to the UK example, is what is the level of sophistication by which information is being made available to the stakeholders? Is information available at all? Is it available in some form, but it's not particularly good? Is it available in some form which is okay, but it has limited uses because of copyright or other restrictions? Is it available in a sophisticated form like bulk data or API? Is it available across silos? Are we measuring whether it's being used? So one thing that I love about, and I forget the official name, but it's POST in the UK. It's the Office of Science and Technology. One is that it was an idea that originally started in the US, although the US foolishly killed off that office while many other countries kept it going. But they also measure how often the reports are cited inside in the record of parliamentary activities, in the committee reports. They're seeing whether this stuff is useful. And they also have this great method for inquiries where they engage with the universities around the country to ask scientific questions and to get answers. That is a model for us and for many others. And as you see innovations that happen in a parliament, the House of Representatives created an ethics watchdog 15 years ago, the Office of Congressional Ethics, that has worked brilliantly. And there are not many things that you can say about the Congress that have worked brilliantly, but this is one. As you can see these ideas arising, to what extent are they diffusing throughout the other parliaments around the world? You know, are we in this conversation? I would say also the World e-Parliament meetings and the reports that come from that can be a useful way of assessing, to some extent, the level of engagements that's taking place. And I would also look at sort of democratic engagement. To what extent are people and everyone else sort of engaged in the local democratic process? And there are ways of assessing that, including satisfaction in one's country. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long, but I think there are a lot of very valuable ways that we can create a way of encouraging the democracies to compete to see which ones can better serve the needs of their citizens and further like our democratic goals. So it's a great question and a very hard one.
Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, we are almost running out of time. So I would like to hear your closing remarks, Sharon, on this matter.
I think my closing remarks are, I'm happy to come back at some point with some more of a success story as we get this data platform going. But I think it's a really important topic. I think it's, you know, I'm so pleased we've got the business case because I think it's such an important area. You know, we do have to share data. We've got to make it usable, and people have got to get value from it. So yeah, as you can see, I'm very passionate about it.
Thank you very much. Daniel, your closing remarks?
So, just that the more that we can learn from countries that are successfully going down this path, that we can inspire one another and learn from each other, I think the more successful we will be as a global democratic community. And conferences like this and conversations that we're having now are essential. And I'm so glad to be able to participate, and I'm appreciative of all of you hosting it. So thank you.